All right, let's get started. My name is Will Rubin, Head of Communications here at YCharts. Hosting our webinar today is my colleague, Carl Reed, a sales engineer on our team. Today, we're asking the question, how is your performance this year, and how can you position your portfolio for success moving forward? We'll then have a quick Q&A for Carl at the end of his demonstration. However, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can submit them to us on the left-hand side of your screen. For any questions not answered by Carl today, your support contact will soon reach out to you with the information you're looking for. Please keep in mind that the content of this webinar is meant for educational purposes only, and not intended to be used in investment advice. Nor is YCharts acting as an advising party regarding client funds in any way. Finally, as always, a recording of the webinar will be made available on YCharts and sent to all attendees. Now I'm going to pass it over to Carl to get us started.
All right, thank you, Will, for that introduction. And I also want to say thank you for everybody joining our webinar here. To get things started here, I would love to elaborate on Will's introduction there in saying that in this webinar, we're going to focus on a few key areas. That's going to start with creating year-end presentation tools that you can use with your clients, and then really dive into how to position your portfolios for success going into the new year with analyzing exposure data and then making appropriate changes. Along the way, we're going to be touching on 3 new features of YCharts. First is the ability to share your model portfolios. This I'm really excited to get into, as this has been one of the most highly requested features that I can remember in being here at YCharts. So we'll certainly cover that, and then also work our way into our other new feature, Quickflows, which is really designed to automate and streamline some of the common workflows that you're using as an advisor. Finally, we'll touch on our newest report from model portfolios, which is going to be our side-by-side reports to go along with our portfolio overviews. So, without further ado, we're going to hop right into things and start by creating a chart to then throw into a year-end presentation. So, I'll hop over to my dashboard here on YCharts, and the easiest way to pull in a chart of a model portfolio and a benchmark to throw into a year-end presentation is going to be by navigating to that model portfolio's quote page. This is something a lot of our advisors have been doing here at year-end. And then to give you a little bit of an idea here about the presentation, I'm going to be referencing this Global Growth 2019 model throughout my presentation. So, once I click on that, for those of you who are not familiar with model portfolios, you're going to see 6 tabs here at the top of a model portfolio quote page, being the quote, performance, allocations, holdings, fundamental chart, and data. The one that we're interested in here with creating those visuals is going to be the fundamental chart tab. By default, once this page loads up, the model portfolio is going to be automatically charted with the assigned benchmark to that model. So in this case, as you can see, the Global Growth 2019 model is charted, as well as the S&P Target Risk Moderate Index. By default, the fundamental chart is going to default to 1 year. However, since we're really honing in on 2019, we can select the year-to-date option, which is just going to give us data in 2019. Keep in mind, if you were looking for another date range, we have the predefined options available here above the chart. And then we also have the option to create a custom date range here on the right-hand side. Additional options, depending on that conversation that you're having with your clients, whether it's simply performance versus a benchmark, or maybe something like talking about risk with a client, can be changed here on the left-hand side with data format. So I bring up that conversation or the key talking points in your conversation because we can really customize that here. Again, by default, this is going to be in percent change as it currently is. If it is easier for you to talk through with clients, viewing that as a growth of 10K option, that's certainly right there. And then as mentioned a moment ago, if that conversation is more centered around risk, we have that option to select percent off high. So those are a couple of key areas that you can customize when throwing together a visual here. For my purposes, I'm going to go back to that percentage change format and then click on the on presentation view here to then throw in a chart title for the chart you wanted to throw into a presentation here. So once I have that title, that's going to update the chart. And as you can see, since we're in presentation mode, you're going to get that logo in the bottom left-hand corner. If you don't have that logo already loaded into charts, that's something that you can send to your account manager at YCharts to have them add in as a default. So now that we have our final chart that we want to add to our presentation, we can export that image by clicking on the export option in the top right-hand corner and download image. For those of you who are using Google Chrome and Firefox, that download is going to show up in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. And clicking on that is going to open up that image file. Now, something I've seen a lot of our clients do is actually incorporate these chart images into one of our economic summary decks. For those of you who are not familiar, YCharts has now been producing economic summary decks that are now available on the support topic page in YCharts. So what I'll do is actually download that most recent one, open that on my computer, and as you can see, I've already created a new slide for that model portfolio performance. And now if I go back to that image file, I can simply right-click, copy that image, head back into PowerPoint on this slide, right-click again, and paste that image in here. Now, within a couple of clicks here, now I have a new slide showing the model portfolio performance versus its appropriate benchmark in a ready-to-present client deck with other economic and market indicators. So that's certainly one way that YCharts can help in creating those end-of-year presentation tools. Another option when speaking about model portfolios is going to be some of those comprehensive overview reports that can be found on that model's quote page as well. Heading back over to that Global Growth 2019 model portfolio, in the top right-hand corner, you're going to see the option to generate report. After clicking on Generate Report, you're going to have all of the predefined reports that have already been created and preloaded onto your account. In this example, I'm just going to click on the Comprehensive Overview Report, which is going to be our most in-depth report with all of the modules that you can add to a particular PDF report here. After clicking on Generate, that's going to queue a download just like that image file a minute ago. And after clicking on that, that should open in your browser. So this comprehensive overview report is going to be great for going over things such as returns, key stats, and any other exposure data that are going to be key talking points with clients at the year end. And while I'm scrolling through this, keep in mind that any of these reports can actually be customized, and this is actually why I opened up the comprehensive overview to begin with. This is going to actually include all of the modules that can be added to a custom PDF and something you can customize with your account manager here at YCharts. So let's say something like geographic exposure and stock style exposure were key talking points in your conversations. You can simply email your account manager with those changes to one of these reports, and a customized report will then be made available on your account. The last thing I'll note here is that we have had this top 10 holding module in the past, and something that has actually recently been released is an all holding module that will, instead of 10 holdings, give you all of the holdings that make up that model portfolio, along with the weight, the price, the 1, 3, and 5-year returns, distribution yield, and expense ratio. So a nice little addition there in terms of those reports. Those are certainly two key things that I've personally worked with a lot of our clients in generating here coming up on year end. Next, we're going to go into how to analyze current portfolios and potentially make changes to a model going into 2020. To do that, I'm going to head over to Comp Tables via the Tools dropdown here. So once getting in Comp Tables, to give somebody an overview that maybe isn't as familiar, it's going to be a great tool to use when analyzing regional exposures, sector exposures, really any type of exposure that you want to analyze for a model portfolio in particular. Something I'll go through here is going to be regional exposure as it relates to certain country exposure as well. So to analyze that for a model portfolio, it's as easy as pulling that model up in the securities and lists field here. Once you select that and click that in the dropdown, I can apply a metric set or search for any particular metrics in this search field. For this example, I've already built out a regional metric set that I'm going to apply to this global growth model portfolio. Now, as you can see, once I click that, all the metrics appear here on the left-hand side, and to hide that, to give me the data, I can click on that little arrow dropdown. What we're left with is our model portfolio with all of the super regional exposures going from North America to Japan. Now let's say I wanted to limit that Latin America total exposure, or in particular, see basically what the underlying holdings are made up of to then potentially make a change going into 2020. What I can do is actually import the underlying holdings by clicking on the lists option here, clicking on My Model Portfolios, again, My Model Portfolios on the right-hand side, and selecting the Global Growth 2019. Once I do that, all of the underlying holdings will come in here, and simply remove the portfolio as a whole by exiting out of that. And to see what's making up that Latin American total exposure, I can then double click on that Latin American total exposure column to quickly analyze the holdings and what their exposure is to that region. Right off the bat, we can see that ILF makes up a huge portion of that, or a lot of that fund is exposed to Latin America. Now let's say I wanted to make sure within that I didn't want any exposure to Brazil or Argentina and get really granular here. I can go back up to this metric search field and type in a specific country such as Brazil and see that we do have a Brazil total exposure metric that can be added, as well as an Argentina. Once I add those two metrics, you can see on the right-hand side, those will be added. And to rearrange this, to bring this more to the forefront, I can click and drag these columns over to the left-hand side here. So right off the bat, we see that 65% of ILF is made up of Brazil or Argentina, whereas EEM is only about 7.44%. So it really seems that ILF is making up a big portion of that Brazilian and Argentinian exposure. So let's say we wanted to find an ETF with a similar Latin American exposure. However, we wanted to make sure that it didn't really have too much exposure to those two countries due to maybe some news that we saw recently. What I like to do here is actually right-click on any of those tickers that I want to analyze further from comp tables and open it in a new tab. As you can see here, ILF will open in a new tab, and then I can quickly reference that table if I wanted to go back to it. This is where Quickflows really becomes your best friend moving into an ETF's quote page. As discussed before, that will be at the top of the page here, and after clicking on it, we have options to view the performance of this fund versus the market. We can find similar securities. We can go into some technical analysis. But as you can imagine, what we're really here for is finding a similar ETF with a lesser exposure to Brazil and Argentina. So we will select that find similar ETF option. After doing so, that's going to pull you into our fund screener. And by default, that's going to create a screen that is made up of the same characteristics as the ETF you're analyzing. So in this example, you'll see that we're already filtering by the Latin American stock category, the prospectus objective of growth, the equity style of large cap value, and then key attributes such as an index fund, inverse fund, and leveraged fund. However, as we can see, this is really narrowing the universe down to one result, which is ILF. So with this screen being one result, it's not too helpful as is. However, with Quickflows, that's going to give us a great starting point to then come over here and remove the filters that are placing too much restriction on these results. So once we close out of those last few as it pertains to attributes and the equity style, and only leave the filter of the fund category of Latin American stock, we can see we have about 26 results. From here, if we wanted to make sure the combined exposure of Brazil and Argentina was less than 50%, we can do so by adding a filter here on the left-hand side. So after clicking on filter, we'll want to select the equation option because this is going to give us the ability to combine the Brazil and Argentina total exposure into one metric and filter by it. So we'll search for Brazil first, use the plus sign on our keyboard, and then search for Argentina to combine those metrics and filter by it. From there, we'll want to make sure that this combined exposure is less than 50%. After we click on submit, we'll see that we're left with two particular funds, PACA and OTGAX. Again, just like in comp tables, what I love to do here to perform additional research is right-click on a symbol to then open it in a new tab in our browser to perform further research here on the selected fund. On this quote page, we can again use Quickflows to view the calendar returns, the return versus market, or any other options here that are available. For our purposes, we'll say that we did perform that due diligence, and PACA is something we wanted to add to our global growth model. To make that change, I'd recommend duplicating our old model portfolio, performing that change, and then seeing what that change did to the different exposures of the portfolio. So to do that, we'll hover over Tools and click on Model Portfolios. Find our Global Growth 2019 model here. And in this More Options dropdown, we have the ability to duplicate a model for just this purpose. Once we click on Duplicate, we can then create our Global Growth 2020 and click duplicate. Once the new model has duplicated, you'll see that available in your model portfolios here. So once that model is done calculating, we can then edit the underlying holdings by clicking on the pencil icon on the right-hand side. After landing in the portfolio editor here, you'll want to select the Edit Items option on the right-hand side of the page. Find the holding that you want to adjust, in this case, ILF. Then replace that with whatever security that you want to replace it with, in this case, PACA. Hit Enter, and you'll see that holding update on the left-hand side. Once you're ready to finalize that change, you can scroll to the bottom of the page and click Update, and then scroll back up top and click on Save in the right-hand corner. So once that new model with the appropriate changes has been calculated, we can then compare that versus our old portfolio by navigating to the new quote page of the updated portfolio. So we'll do that by searching for our Global Growth 2020. And then via the Generate Report option in the top right-hand corner, we can create a side-by-side report here. Again, just like those portfolio overviews, the side-by-side reports can be customized by working with your account manager here at YCharts. And in this case, I've actually created my own to dive in specifically to that regional exposure and equity exposures. So I'll select that option, click on Next, and then search for the old portfolio without those changes. After selecting that, you can click on Next to generate the report. After opening the PDF, you'll see all of the modules that are included in that particular report, with the updated 2020 portfolio on the left-hand side and the old 2019 portfolio on the current side. So after going through all of the modules and making sure everything is in line with what you would expect with those changes, you can then share this model portfolio for the team to perform further analysis by navigating back to the model portfolio's quote page. And now you should have the ability to click on this share option in the top right-hand corner, which will share to anybody in your team. With that, you have the ability to give the permission to view, edit, or cannot view, depending on how you want to collaborate with your team and how to perform that further research. With that said, that concludes the content portion of this webinar, and I'm going to kick it back to Will to discuss questions that came up along the way.
Thanks, Carl, for showing us how to use YCharts in year-end meetings and how you can position portfolios for continued success. Before we jump into the Q&A, I want to reiterate that a recording of this webinar will be made available in the support topics section of our site, in case you need to review anything we went over or to share with your colleagues. Now we're going to begin the Q&A, and Carl, I'm going to ask you a few quick questions. First one, when you generate the side-by-side report, which model is recommended and which model is current?
Great question, Will. So if I actually head back to the report that I generated, I think going through the example again is the easiest. So when I created that side-by-side report from the 2020 or updated model portfolio, that's going to be the recommended side of the side-by-side report, whereas the old portfolio that I had to search for when creating it is the current.
Awesome, thank you. Next question here is, can you give us a little bit more info on the Quickflows feature?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I head back over here and then go back to any stock or ETF, click on Quickflows. Everybody will see this now. However, if you don't have access to a tool, you will be prompted with an upgrade.
Great. And last question is, who am I able to share my model portfolios with?
Yeah, another great question, Will. So heading to a model portfolio now, you'll be able to share that with anybody in your team. And if you are currently not set up with the team here, that's something that your account manager here at YCharts can help you out with. And if you contact them, they'll be able to set you and your other team members up in a group to give you the ability to share.
Awesome. All right, thanks, Carl, for covering all the questions. And thank you all for attending today's webinar. We always appreciate any feedback you may have. If you have any questions regarding anything we covered today, please feel free to reach out to your YCharts support contact. Thanks again.